When people hear the word mindfulness, many people think of meditation, but mindfulness, as we study it, has nothing to do with meditation. It's just an entirely different process. Meditation is not mindfulness. It's a practice you undergo to lead to post meditative mindfulness. Mindfulness, as I study it, is immediate, and it's not a practice. It is a way of being that essentially comes from appreciating uncertainty. Now, there are two ways to become mindful. One is top down, and the other is bottom up. So, top down, once you realize that everything is changing, everything looks different from different perspectives. The thought that you know something independent of context is simply wrong. Okay. When I give these talks, Richard, I often ask people some questions, things that everybody knows to show them that they don't know. Okay, so let's do one. So how much is one plus one?
Okay, so that's two.
How much?
Only.
Two,
Mm,
right. But it isn't always two. If
right.
you take one pile of laundry and you add it to one pile of laundry, one plus one is one. If
Mm,
you take 1 watt of chewing gum and add 1 watt of chewing gum, one plus one is one. One cloud plus one cloud, one plus one is one. So in the real world, one plus one doesn't equal two as often as probably even more often it doesn't equal two as it does. But now imagine now that you realize even this thing, this fact that you thought you knew that everybody knew that was surely true, and now you know that it's not. So after we finish talking, someone comes up to you, unlikely, but says, "Hey, Richard, how much is one plus one?" You're not going to mindlessly blurt out two anymore. You're going to pay attention to the context, and now you have a choice. So when you're mindless, when you knew for sure one plus one was two, you didn't have a choice. Now you can say it's two, it's one. You can even say it's 10, because when you use a base two number system, one plus one is written as 10. And, okay, so that's top down, recognizing we don't know. So then everything is new. Now, people know they don't know, but they think they should know. And therein lies the problem, because there are some people who walk around acting like they know, and you're afraid to look stupid or whatever. So we either avoid them or we pretend. Nobody knows. You can't know because everything is always changing. Okay, so you need to make a universal attribution for not knowing. I don't know, you don't, nobody knows, rather than a personal attribution. You know, but I don't. Now, when you know you don't know, everything is new, everything is potentially exciting. Okay, so it's hard for people because all of us, especially those of us who are older, have lived our lives believing that there are these absolutes, right? But if we can learn to question that, then we will naturally be mindful. All right. So let's say you come to visit me. Right now, I'm in my house in Dartmouth, Mass. You've never been here before. You don't have to practice being mindful. As soon as you get here, you're going to look around, right? You're going to notice new things. You're going to say, "Oh, did she do that painting? What books is she? What is that?" And you will naturally take in new information. That's the bottom up way of becoming mindful, which is take the things you think you know and notice all the ways that they're new. And as you're actively noticing, then you're mindful. The neurons are firing and you're feeling good. And it turns out that when we get older people to do this active noticing, they live longer. So it's good for your health, your happiness, your relationship. It's good for everything. I have been studying this, I said, for so long, I've had an opportunity to test many measures. And
mm,
across the board, we improve when we're more mindful. Okay, so when you're mindful, you're actively noticing. When you're mindless, you're relying on the facts, the absolutes, the things from the past. All right. And, so you're more or less like a robot. You're oblivious to the fact that everything is changing, that context matters, perspective matters. And essentially, your behavior is rule and routine governed. And when you're mindful, you can have rules and routines, but they guide what you're doing. They don't overly determine it. Right? Interestingly, when most people think that they're mindful. And the reason they think this is that when they're not there, because they're mindless, they're not there to know they're not there. Sadly, these 45 years of research has shown that virtually all of us are not there most of the time.
Mhm.
Right now, it's especially important for those of us who are older to stop being this way, to get rid of all this automatic behavior, this mindlessness, for several reasons. First is that when you're actively noticing the neurons are firing, and that is literally and figuratively enlivening. But most of us grew up at a time when being old wasn't such a good thing. And so we learned many negative things about aging. And we just took them in and we think they're true. We don't question them no more than we question how much is 1 plus 1. And that hurts us because all of these negative things about aging become self-fulfilling prophecies. So here's an easy one. Let's say I'm 77. And if I bought into the idea that as you get older, you just start to fall apart. Okay, so now I hurt my wrist or my wrist hurts. I'm not going to do anything about it because after all, I'm 77. At some point, you fall apart. But if I were 25 and my wrist hurt, at 25, your wrist isn't supposed to hurt. So what you do is you take care of it. So the older person isn't taking care of the wrist, the young person is. And of course, down the road, the old person's wrist is going to get worse and worse, having nothing to do with aging. The other thing that, when you're young, you're often taught that as you get older, you start to forget.
Mhm.
Now, I teach Harvard students. These are some of the best and the brightest in the world. And right before I give them a lecture on aging, I start and I ask them, so this will be on Thursday. I'll say, on Tuesday, before we left class, what was the last thing I said? None of them know. All right. So when you're young, you're not infrequently forgetful as well. You just don't worry about it. Now, life changes, our values change as we get older. You stop caring about some of the silly things you cared about when you were younger. As a result of that, you don't take in information in the same way. So when I was an up and coming, if I were it was going to meet, 3 or 4 people who were big, important, I'd make sure I learned their names. Richard, I must admit, at this point, I don't care. So if you introduce me to 4 younger people, 4 old, I probably won't learn their names. Now, let's say later on in the day, you say to me, remember Sarah. Which one was Sarah? I don't remember. But it's not a problem of memory. I didn't care, so I didn't learn her name in the first place. So when I don't know her name in the second place, it's not that I've forgotten. All right. So many of the debilitations we see with seniors is a function of our mindsets, not a function of a necessary decrement. Now, surely there are changes as you get older, but a change doesn't mean a decrement. If you're at the top of a hill and there's snow and you roll down the hill, when you get to the bottom of the, you're going to have more snow on you. Is that good or bad? Well, if you're trying to hide from everybody and look like a snowman, it's good. Actually, being covered with snow, since that's 32 degrees, if it's 20 degrees outside, it's actually insulation. So it's good for you. All right. So what is the point? The point is, yes, there are changes, but they're not at all losses. There's, to me, life just gets better and better. Okay,
So,
so now what I just was talking about is how our beliefs often become self-fulfilling prophecies, and so I've done a lot of work. Much of it is reported in my new book, The Mindful Body, on mind body unity. And here the
mm,
idea is that mind body, these are just words. And if you have a notion of a mind separate from a body, then you have to figure out, how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought to something material in the
mm.
body? And I say this is all nonsense, even if it's just for heuristic purposes, but I think it's literally true. Let's put the mind and body back together. Now, if it's one thing, then wherever we're putting the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. So we've done lots and lots of studies where we put the mind in strange places and take the measurements from the body. And I'll tell you about some of these. They're all reported in the Mindful Body. But the larger point of it is you can be whatever you're thinking, and that most things are mutable, that we're holding still, and that if something happens, if you do something and it has some negative consequence, small, it doesn't, if you do forget something, it doesn't mean now you're going to keep forgetting. If you fumble with the keys, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to, do that fine motor skill, opening the door yourself. And people, when they're younger, know this. If they screw up, as they would say, they just try it again. When you're older, if you screw up, you say, this is the beginning of the end. But okay, so now we want to change all of those views. So the first test of mind-body unity, I talked about in several of my books. And it's now a famous study. I can call my own study famous because if you tune into The Simpsons Go to Havana, they actually describe the study. So what we did was retrofitted a retreat to 20 years earlier and had elderly men live there as if they were their younger selves. So they would be speaking about past events as if they were just unfolding. The place wasn't quite a Hollywood set because I didn't have the money for that, but it was reminiscent of 20 years earlier. In every way we could think of, we were trying to get people to put themselves back in time. They lived there for just a week. As a result of that, they got their hearing improved, their vision improved, their memory, their strength, and they looked noticeably younger. So that was a very exciting test of mind-body unity. We put your minds in a younger place and everything about you seemed younger. The next study in that series was kind of fun. We took chambermaids. Now, everybody knows chambermaids are the people who are cleaning motel rooms, hotel rooms. They're exercising all day long. But if you ask them, are they getting any exercise? They say no, because they think, and according to the Surgeon General who sits behind a desk all day, exercise is what you do after work. And after work, they're just too tired. Okay, very simple study. We divide them into two groups and we teach one of the groups that their work is actually exercise. We're just changing their mindset. All right. We teach them that working on, making a bed is like working on this machine at the gym, and so on. So now we have two groups. One group that sees their work as exercise, the other group that doesn't. We see they're not eating any differently, working any harder on any of the measures going into this. They're no different. However, now that they've changed their mindset, as a result of changing their mind, they lost weight. There was a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down. Our minds are so much more powerful. Let me jump to the end, but I have studies with all sorts of disorders common for those of us over 60, that we inflicted a wound. Now, Richard, you know me all these years. I'm not a sadist, so it's not a big wound, but it's a little wound, but it's a wound. And we have people sitting in front of a clock. Now, unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. For a third of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's going half as fast as real time. And for a third of the people, it's real time. The question we're asking is, would that wound heal based on real time or based on perceived time, clock time? And that's what we got. When they thought time had gone by quicker, their wound healed more quickly. We have many, many studies like this, all suggesting the power that we have over our health and happiness is extraordinary if we just allow ourselves to experience it. So here we have being mindful, actively noticing, and that's what you're doing when you're having fun. right?
Yeah.
You can't have fun unless you're not a robot, you're not mindless, unless you're actively engaged. And so then all sorts of good things are happening to you. If you can remove all of those negative beliefs, again, you're going to allow yourself a longer, happier life.